I'm so excited about today's session. And hello, all. Warm welcome to the part two QA studio workshop on Cypress session. And I'm with the mentor and the instructor and ambassador of Cypress community, Walmyr. And this workshop is part of our Global Testers Day celebration. And I'm Shrija, the community advocate for QA Touch. And QA Touch is a modern test management tool that enables you and your team to deliver the high quality software. And no, it has been a year since we started our QA Masterclass virtual web series, and that has brought in together more than 20 plus QA leaders across the globe and 200 plus unique participants, and an amazing content which is available in our YouTube channel of QA Touch. And the significant thought process behind this initiative of doing all this event is to facilitate learning, sharing, and connecting among the testing community. And the commemorate success of the QA masterclass had paved a path for us to celebrate the biggest virtual community event. So that's it, like Global Testers Day 2021. So the motto of the event is to unite the testers of all the domains and providing them a platform for a learning and also for a lot more fun to explore themselves. And we have completely dedicated the 2 months, the August and September, for celebrating the testers of all domains and all the background for all the work they are doing for the community as such. And we have come up with the four amazing contests, and the chain of thoughts, that is mind mapping contest and blogathon. So where we got an overwhelming response in the month of August, and we'll be announcing the results shortly on the Global Testers Day on September 9. And the quiz masters, so which is scheduled on September 6th, that is on Monday. Please watch out our social space, and you'll get an email for the quest link, and please participate. And the another amazing thing about the event is my upside down QA stories. And this is especially, like, which is close to my heart. Like, we are reaching out to the QA leaders to get their inspiring testing experiences as a video format. And so we are getting both their upside and downside stories. And we already started publishing the stories from yesterday. And yesterday we started with an amazing, the QA leader, the automation panda, Andrew's story. Like, please do check our social channel and our YouTube channel QA Touch. And also, like, if you have an amazing QA story, if you want to share with the QA community, and send us an email, just record a video about our inspiring story, which should not be more than 10 minutes, and send us at events@qatouch.com. And today, as I said, like, it's going to be an interesting session with Walmyr Filho. Like, he's an instructor and founder at Talking About Testing, and he's a software engineer. And of course, like, he loves testing a lot. And he's an ambassador for Cypress community. And he's a blogger, YouTuber, and writer. And please do check out his page, Talking About Testing. And he's a mentor and consultant. And and also he's an active member of testing, automation, and JavaScript communities. And before jumping into the session, I would like to give a small housekeeping tip on the Zoom platform. So if you have any questions, please do raise your questions in the Q&A section. And if you want to converse, just post your message in the chat section, and all your questions will be addressed at the end by the speaker. And over to you, Walmyr, and thank you so much for accepting your invite for doing in session. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for inviting me, Srita. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited to share a bit of my knowledge with the audience of this event. So let me share my screen here. Yeah, thanks everyone for attending the event. I hope you have a great session today, and I hope you learn something by the end of it. I forgot to add a slide for presenting myself, so I will present myself in the first slide. So my name is Walmyr. I've been working with software testing for quite a while, since 2004. I'm originally from Brazil, but I live here in Europe, in the Netherlands. Before that, I lived in Norway. I worked for some companies like whereby.com, GitLab, and nowadays I am working just for myself as a mentor and as an instructor of online courses. Since I'm Brazilian, I have a lot of content in Portuguese, but I also have a lot of content in English as well. Not as much as I have in Portuguese, but I always try to translate content from Portuguese to English, and also my courses as well. So yeah, I am passionate about testing automation. I am a Cypress IO ambassador. I've been mentoring people since 2016, and I have a lot of experience with test automation. So I hope you can enjoy this session of today, which is gonna be about writing Cypress tests without Cucumber. So sorry. So the agenda for today's talk, first of all, I'm going to talk about the motivation for talking about this subject specifically. Then why do we use Cucumber? Then I'll talk a little bit about Cypress, what is Cypress? And I intend to spend most of the time in the demo where I will show you how we can use the concepts of Cucumber, like using the keywords given, when, then, iterating over lists to have one test that tests the same thing based on different data, and how to use tags, but doing all that without having to configure Cucumber to integrate it with Cypress. And by the end, I'll have the key takeaways of the talk, and some space for questions. So the motivation for this talk is because people usually ask me these 4 questions. So the first question is, how do I integrate Cypress with Cucumber plugin? The second question is, can you help me with an error in the Cucumber integration? The third one is, how do I iterate over a list in a Cypress test if I'm not using Cucumber? And the fourth is, how do I run tests based on tags without Cucumber? Just to give you some context, I have worked, when I started doing test automation for real, I used Cucumber. But what I realized was that the developers that were working with me, they were not very aware or familiar with Cucumber. And they found that writing tests in Cucumber in Gherkin language and then translating this natural language into code was an extra level of abstraction that would add more complexity to the code than the benefits that Cucumber promises to give us back. So, but the point is that for the last 2 questions, they usually say, I can easily do that with Cucumber, meaning that they can iterate over a list. You can, in Cucumber, create a table with columns and rows, and you can create one test that will iterate over every row of this list and test the same thing based on different data. And they say also that they can run a test that has a specific tag if they use Cucumber. So this is what they tell me. But what's the point of knowing how to iterate over a list and how to run tests of a specific tag if you don't know how to configure it, if you don't know how to configure Cucumber, which is question 1, and if you don't know, you don't know how to deal with errors when they happen. So Cucumber helps with describing how the application should behave in a language that both the business and the technical teams can understand. So this is one of the main reasons why we try to use Cucumber, right? But here's the thing. You can have all these benefits without using Cucumber. And that's what I'm going to show you today. And let me talk a little bit about Cypress. So Cypress is a powerful testing automation framework for anything that runs in the browser. It's an open source tool that has a huge community around it. And last but not least, is a tool that brings you joy while you are using it. So Cypress is a very modern tool. And when you start using Cypress, you don't want to use a different tool anymore because it gives you so much power to do so much more than you were used to do with different testing automation tools. So I started using Cypress in 2019. And since then, Cypress has just grown its community, its features, and it's always they are always listening to what the community wants, and they are bringing more and more and more features to be competitive with the other players in the market. But in this talk, I intend to spend most of the time in the demo. So if you want, feel free to follow along with me. Just open a terminal and let's do some coding. So I have my terminal open here. And what I'm going to do first, just give me a moment because I have to open something else here. Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to start a Cypress project from scratch. So I have a shell script on my machine, which helps me with doing lots of manual steps in just one command. So I'm just going to use it just because I don't need to do all those steps manually. So I'm going to create a project called writing that Cypress tests without Cucumber. So this shell script here that I'm going to execute, it's going to initialize npm, it's going to initialize git, it's going to create a git ignore file, it's going to install Cypress and do all that stuff that we have to do when we are starting a new project. So let's see. It has initialized git, it has initialized npm as well, where we have the package.json file. It has installed Cypress on version 8.3.1, which is the latest version. And it has just opened Cypress here on a different window. And when you open Cypress for the first time, Cypress already creates some example files. So I'm going to use this functionality here to delete the files directly from the test runner, because the idea is that we are going to create the tests ourselves. So I'm just going to delete the files and I'm going to close the test runner. And now I'm going to go back here to the terminal and I'm going to access my workspace directory. And in here, it should have, let me see, works. It seems I have done something wrong in my shell script. So let me just fix it. CSH. Yeah, my shell script, I changed it yesterday and the name of the folder should be workspaces, not workspace. So I have to run it again. Sorry about that. So I'm just going to run again the same command and it's going to create all that in the correct folder. And then I'm going to have to, it's going to open Cypress again. Where is it? Yeah. Here it is. I'm going to delete the examples again. I'm going to close Cypress runner. And now if I go to workspaces, we have the directory writing Cypress tests without Cucumber. So I'm just going to open this directory on Visual Studio, which is the IDE that I use for coding. So let me just bring my Visual Studio to this screen as well. So before we start coding, what this shell script has done, it initialized Git so that I can track my files, I can version my files. It initialized npm, which means that it created the package.json file. it installed Cypress on version 8.3.1. And because it's installed Cypress as a dev dependency, it also created a package lock.json file. It created some files that I'm not going to use, which is the cypress.env.example and the cypress.env.json. They are not necessary for this project specifically, so I'm just going to delete them. The git ignore was created automatically for me as well, and the git ignore is the file that we put the files and directories that we don't want Git to version. So I don't want Git to version these ds store file, the cypress.env.json, which I just deleted, so I could even remove it from here actually. When Cypress tests fail, it takes screenshots inside of the Cypress folder /screenshots. So I don't want to track the screenshots. When you run tests in headless mode, Cypress automatically creates videos of the execution. I don't want to track the videos as well. And the node modules directory is where Cypress and its own dependencies were installed, and I don't want to version anything inside of this directory as well. So I'm just going to save it. And when I opened Cypress for the first time, it created the cypress.json file, which is the Cypress configuration file, and it also created this Cypress directory. And in the Cypress directory, it created some subdirectories like fixtures, integration, plugins, and support. And the test files, they live here inside of integration. And as you can see, this folder is empty because I deleted the examples that are automatically created. So let's get started writing some code. So, and actually before that, let me show you the application that we are going to test. So this is the application that we are going to test. This application is called Hacker Stories. This application is an application that I have created when I was reading a book called The Road to React, which is an awesome book if you want to learn about front-end development with React, which is a book from Robin Weyruch. He's from German, if I'm not wrong. And in this book, he basically teaches you how to create a complete front-end application that connects with a third-party API, which in this case is the Hacker News API. So let me describe to you here some of the functionalities of this application. So I'm going to refresh the page. When I access the page for the first time, it already searched for the default term, which is React in this case. So you might see that there's this loading component there that is shown while the request is being made. And when the response of this request comes back, then I render the first 20 items in this list here about this term here that was searched for. Then I can load more, which will load the next 20 items, and I can load more as well. I can load more as much as it gives me more results. Then I have order by functionality as well. By title, I can order by title. I can order by author. I can order by comments, by points. And there is also this action button here. So let's say I have already read this article here. I can click on it and it removes the item from the list. So if I click on them, it starts removing the items from the list. And other functionalities, it has some. So if I search for instance, for cypress.io, it makes another request to bring me results related to Cypress, but it also adds here a button for the previous searched term. So if I click here, it searches again for React. And now I have another button for the previous one, which was Cypress. So if I search for, let's say, Selenium, now it puts the other one in here. I didn't implement the functionality of not adding like you can see that it's repeating React here. I didn't add the functionality of like not putting repetitive buttons here, but that's not a problem. So if I search, for instance, for play, write, it adds the previous one, which was Selenium. If I search for Puppeteer, it adds the previous one, which was Playwright. But the maximum buttons that are shown here are 5. So if I search here now, for instance, for Redux, you can see that only the previous 5 are shown. So it's never going to show more than 5 buttons in here. And then I can click here and search again for this term, for instance. So these are the functionalities of the application that we are going to test. And to create a test, we have to create a file inside of the Cypress/integration directory. So I'm just going to create a file here called demo.spec.js. People sometimes ask me, why do we have to put this .spec extension inside of test files? The idea is that test files are specifications of how the application should behave, and this is a convention that is pretty much used in the JavaScript community. So in Cypress Tests, you define your test suite with a describe block. And in the describe block, you could, for instance, provide the description of your test suite or something. But since this talk is about writing Cypress tests without using Cucumber, what I'm going to add as a test description is, given I am at the Hacker Stories web page. And then we would have our tests here. But since my describe is telling me, given I am at Hacker Stories web page, the first thing that I should do would be visiting this web page. So, and I want all my tests to start in this specific page. So for doing that, we will use a function called before each, which will run before each test. And this function receives a callback function that executes the comments that will be executed before each test. So in here, we would put site.visit to visit the web page. And let me grab the URL of the web page here. And then I put inside of quotes the URL of the web page. And I don't need the extra slash at the end. And then we would have the tests themselves. And for the tests, we use the it block. So we use describe for describing for the test suite, and it for the test cases. So the first test could be, so given I am at the Hacker Stories webpage, then I see 20 results for the default term, which is React. So the first argument of the it block is a description of the test case, and the second one, a callback function, which in this case here, I'm using arrow function of JavaScript. And then I can do my my assertions in this case, like this test. When we use the keywords given, when, then, given means the precondition for our test, when the actions, and then the assertions. In this test here, we don't have any actions. We just visit the page and then we already run our assertions. So in here, I would add my assertions. So let me actually create a test script here. So when you initialize npm for the first time, it creates this scripts section with the test script. And I'm gonna change the test script to run Cypress run, which will run Cypress in what is called interactive mode. But I also want to have a script that will open Cypress in, oh, sorry, this is headless mode. And I want to have a script that will open Cypress in interactive mode so that I can see the tests running. And this we do with Cypress open. So now that I have this script, I can come here to my shortcuts on Visual Studio, and I can click in the play button, which is going to run the side column open, which is going to open Cypress for me. So let me just go back here to the test. Since I already have one test, and although it's empty, and this test already has and this test suite already has a before each hook, which is visiting the web page. I think I can already run it. So I'm just going to click on the demo.spec.js here. And as you can see, it has basically visited the page, and the test has done anything because I didn't told him to do anything yet. Okay. So I'm telling here, then I see 20 results for the default term React. So it would be nice to check that the default term is in the input of type text, this input here, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use sci.get. So when you use Cypress, you have this global object sci that has lots of functionality, like visit for visiting a web page and get for selecting elements. So I'm going to say select an input field which has the type equal to text, which is my text input field. And I'm going to assert that it should have the value of React, which is the default term. When I save it, it's going to rerun. And as you can see here, it has already passed our test. There's something that has gone wrong here, but it's not relevant to the test. But the point is that it was able to find here the term. I tested everything yesterday. Everything was working fine. Today, when I was doing some tests before, I don't know if my internet connection is slower or if Hacker News API is slower, but we might see some errors that I haven't seen yesterday. Anyway, I have recorded the executions as GIFs to show you if we see any failures, like here, something went wrong. Okay. So one thing that I would like to show you as well is that, like, when a search is performed in this application, there is a real request going through Hacker News API. So it would be nice if I could intercept this request and tell Cypress to wait for this request to finish before moving on with my tests. So before the sci.visit here, I'm going to use a functionality that I pretty much like from Cypress, which is the sci.intercept. And the sci.intercept basically allows you to intercept requests in the network layer, and then you can give to these requests an alias. And when I say sci.intercept, I'm not making a request. I'm just listening to requests that might happen when some actions are performed. And then when I know that this request is going to be triggered, I can say sci.wait for this request that I created here. So I'm going to intercept a get request to the URL search **. So I'm just using wildcards in the beginning and in the end to get searches for anything. And I'm going to give to this intercept an alias with the .s, and I'm going to call it get stories, since this application is Hacker Stories. And when I visit the page, right after I visit it, the request already happens because the default term is React. So right after the sci.visit, I'm going to add a sci.wait and wait for that get stories intercept that I created. When we give an alias to something, to call the alias, we have to use @ and the name of the alias. So @ get stories. So intercept a request that might happen. When I visit the page, the request happens, and then I tell Cypress, wait for this request to finish before moving to the test that will assert that the term React is there. So I'm gonna save it. And now it only went through the verification when the request has already finished. And as you can see, the results are already rendered. So that's the first thing. We are already asserting on the default term, but we want to assert that there are 20 results in there. So if we go to the application and we inspect the first element, for instance, we can see that every element in this list has a class item. Item, 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 item. Every item has this class item. So we can use this class for our assertion. So I'm going to use sci.get, get all the elements with the item class. So I use dot in front here to say that item is a class. And then I will do my assertion. It should have the length of 20. And I'm going to save it. It's going to run. And now we can see that it asserted that the term React is the default and that this first div plus the 19 extra are equal to 20. So we have the first test passing. And as you can see, we are using the given and then keywords without having to use features and Cucumber and all that stuff. And the point is that when you, like, people say to me, like, yeah, but when I write tests with Cucumber, I can describe the application in a very high level, and then it's like magic. Then some code executes, but actually you have to translate this natural language into code to run the things anyway. So why not to write the code directly, right? That's a preference that I have, and also because of my experience with Cucumber, I never was able to use Cucumber in the way that the books describe. So I do prefer to not use Cucumber at all. So we have the first test passing. Now we are going to create some more tests. So the next one would be, let's create now a context. So you can organize your tests inside of Cypress in contexts as well. So each blocks are the test case, but contexts are like subsuites of this bigger test suite here. So I have one subsuite, which is I'm gonna say, when I clear the text field and search for a new term. So for instance, I search for Cypress.io. So as you can see, like the test cases, they are very descriptive. And then in here, since I am inside of a context, I can add another before each, because I might have more tests that will depend on this same context here, that I clear the field and I search for Cypress.io. So I'm going to create another before each here. And this before each here is going to do the following. I'm going to use a sci.get to get the same input field of type text. I'm going to chain a dot clear to clear the field, as I'm saying here, when I clear the text field. And right after clearing the text field, I'm going to type the term that I want to search for, which is Cypress.io. And right after searching, I want to simulate the user pressing enter, so I can use this special, the curly braces with enter inside, and it's going to type Cypress.io and it's going to press enter. And right after that, another request is going to be made to this route here. So I can use again sci.wait for the get stories, so that my tests that will come inside of this context after the before each will only execute when the stories are already there. And then I can have my test. The first one would be, for instance, then I see a quick search button for the previous term, which was React, right? Because I searched for Cypress, now React is shown as a quick search button. So this is my first test inside of this context. And let me see. Let's go back to the application. So if we inspect these elements here, these buttons, we can see that we have 5 buttons inside of a div, and this div has the class last searches. So we can use this last searches class for our assertion. So in here, we can say and in here I'm going to use, instead of using sci.get, I'm going to show you a different command of Cypress, which is sci.contains. So with sci.contains, I can pass as a first argument a CSS selector. So for instance, last searches space button. So find all the buttons inside of the div with the class last searches. But then find the button that contains the term, the string React, which is the default term. And then I can assert that this button React inside of the last searches div should be visible. So I'm going to save it. We're going to see the test running again. And as you can see here, the before each, we have the before each for the describe, which visits the page and waits for the request. We have the before each for the context, which clears the field. Then here is how it was before. Here is how it is after. It typed Cypress IO, and then we can see the React, the button with the term React. We find it, and we assert that it is visible. So perfect. One more test. And then inside of this same context here, we could, for instance, add another test. And here we could, instead of use then, we could use and I see 20 results for the new searched term. Because I just searched for something else, and I can add this same assertion as I did before. So get all the items, and they should be 20. They should have the length of 20. And as you can see here in the command logs of the Cypress runner, we see just the descriptions when we don't open the task suite, which means that we have exactly the same result as if we would have if we were using Cucumber. Given I am at Hacker Store's webpage, then I see 20 results for the default term React. When I clear the text field and I search for a new term, for example, Cypress, then I see a quick search button for the previous term, React, and I see 20 results for the new searched term. Very simple. So we have this context here, and I think this one is complete. So let's create another one. So there's also the functionality of like that I can see only a max of 5 buttons, right? So we could create here a context that would be when I search for more than 5 random terms. And then I would execute my context. But here I'm saying that I want to search for random terms. So what I'm gonna do is, let me find the terminal. I'm gonna install Faker as a dev dependency. Faker is an open source library that allows you to create fake data for your tests, for instance. So I'm just gonna use Faker for that because I think it's gonna be very helpful. So I'm gonna create a variable of type const. I'm gonna call it Faker, and then I'm gonna execute the require JavaScript function to import the Faker library inside of this context. And then I'm gonna create another variable, which I'm gonna call random term. And this one I'm gonna add as a let variable because I'm gonna change it along the way. And then I'm gonna have my before each. So for all the tests inside of this context. For the before each, let's see. In here, I want to search for more than 5 random terms, but I don't want to do something like that 5 times because it's going to be a lot of repetitive code if I have to do this 5 times, right? So one nice thing that Cypress has is that Cypress packages with it lots of tools that we developers are already used to. And one of them is Lodash. So we can use Cypress.Lodash dot, and then we can use all the functionalities that Lodash gives us. And one of them is called times, which allows us to execute a block of code a number of times. So the first thing that it receives is the number of times we want to execute this block of code. So I want to execute this block of code 6 times so that I will search for 6 terms and only 5 terms will be shown in the quick search buttons there. And then the second argument is a function. So I'm going to just put here an arrow function. Then I'm going to get the random term variable, and I'm going to say that it is equal to faker.lauren.word. So it's just gonna, I'm just giving a random word to this variable here. And right after defining the value for the variable, I'm gonna do that stuff from here. So I'm gonna say, get the input field of type text, clear it, and then in here, I have to type this random term here. So I'm gonna use template literals from JavaScript here, where I'm gonna put a JavaScript expression in here, which is my variable, and then I'm pressing enter, okay? So I have my context, I have my before each. When I search for more than 5 random terms, I'm here searching for 6 random terms, which is more than 5. And then I can have my test. So my test is going to be then only the last 5 terms are shown as quick search buttons. And then I can create the function that will execute this test for myself. And then the idea would be that the assertion would be a sci.get for the same last searches, the div, right? Searches all the buttons inside of this div, and I could use the should have length of 5. So let's save it and run it. And by default, Cypress automatically reruns the tests when you are in interactive mode. So this is why when I save it, it already executes it automatically. And our test has just passed. Although we have typed, we have searched for 6 different terms, it shows us just the last 5. So we searched for EST, there was React, we searched for, there's another random word here, we search for something else, we search for something else, we search for something else. And when we search for the 6th one, React disappeared, and the previous one is there. So we assert that there are only 5 buttons for the quick search here, which is awesome. So we are almost there. Let me see. I think we have just 2 more tests to write, and then we can go to the takeaways and questions. Let me see. So I mentioned, so far we are just using the keywords given, when, then, right? But I mentioned before, like, that people usually say, yeah, but what about if I want to create this table with different data and run the same task, and write just one task that will iterate over this table, right? So in JavaScript, we can do that very easily with the use of iterators. So I'm going to create another context here, which I'm going to say, when I clear the text field and search based on a list of terms. So now I have a list of terms I will have, and I want to have the same task that iterates over this list of terms. So I'm going to create a constant variable here called terms to search for. And it's going to be an array, which means a list, right? So the first one could be, for instance, test cafe. The second one could be puppeteer. And the third one could be playwright. So I have these different data, and I want to run the same test against these three different terms. So now that I have an array, I can iterate over the array. So I can use terms to search for dot for each. And the for each function of an array in JavaScript executes a function, and it receives as an argument for the function every item from this array. So I can pass here for each term. So this is the argument of my function, and this will be the body of my function. And then in here, I could have, for instance, my it block. And then here, I'm going to use template literals as well. So then I see 20 results for the term. And then I can put the JavaScript expression here, term. So it's going to create 3 tests. One that says, then I see 20 results for the term test cafe, puppeteer, and playwright. And then the test itself. So again, I don't need to write 3 different test cases. I can write just one and iterate over a list. So let me see here. So I'm just going to copy this to save us some time. So I'm going to get the input of type text. I'm going to clear it. I'm going to type here, instead of random term, the term that we are iterating over. And right after that, I can run this assertion here that there are 20 results, right? So I'm going to save it, and let's see how it goes. As you can see, we already have here the 3 test cases based on that list. And everything is working. It searched for playwright, and after searching for playwright, there are 20 results. When it searched for puppeteer, here there were 20 results, and the same when we searched for test cafe. So I have one last test case that I want to show you, which would be, we have the functionality of, like I already read this item, and I want to click on it to remove it from the list. So we could have another context here, which would be when I dismiss the first item, for instance. And then we would have the before each, which would remove the first item from the list for us. So let's go to the app here and inspect this button here. So we see that it's a button which has the class button, but it also has this button small class. So we can use this button small class here. So in here, we're going to use site.get. Get the element that has the class button small. Then I will chain a dot first. So find the first small button and then click on it. And then in here, I could have my test. Then only 19 results are left. And then I could just copy this here, paste it in here, but instead of 20, it's going to be 19. No. And there's actually one more thing in terms of code that I want to show you. So we're not done. I thought we were, but I actually forgot one thing. Let me put just a dot only in here so we can see just this test running so that we save some time. And as you can see, it executed the before each, it waited for the terms, it found all the small buttons, it found the first one, it clicked on it. Here it is how it was before, and here it is how it was after, where it removed the item. And now we have only 19 items in the list. So we used the keywords given, when, then, without using Cucumber plugin. We iterated over a list without using Cucumber. And I also mentioned that we could use tags, right? So let's say that from all these tests, one of them is the most important one, which could be executed in our smoke test suite, so that we can run the smoke tests first to give us quickest feedback. And only if the smoke tests pass, then we run the rest, right? So I'm going to install another library, which is called Cypress grep. So let me just come to the terminal, and I'm going to use npm I Cypress grep dash uppercase D to install Cypress grep also as a dev dependency. And Cypress grep allows us to do this thing of running tests based on tags. So to configure Cypress grep, we have to go to the support directory, and then inside of the index.js file, I'm just gonna require Cypress grep, and I'm gonna even delete this commands file here because we're not gonna use it. Oops, it seems that I deleted everything. So index.js. Okay, perfect. And let me actually stop the tests here, because every time I save something, it's executing. So just to save us some memory. One other thing that we have to do to configure Cypress grep, which, if I'm not wrong, is an optional thing, but I highly recommend, because we can then have some greater results in the command line. So I'm gonna create this module exports that receives on and config, and it requires Cypress grep, which returns a function, and it executes the function with the config as a parameter, as an argument. So I'm just gonna close it. I'm just gonna close it as well. And let me see. Yeah, and then we could, for instance, let's say that this is not this. So we have this context. When I clear the text field and I search for a new term, we have two tests. And this one, and I see 20 results for the new search term, is the most important one. And I would say it is the most important one, because from all the functionalities of this application, searching for a term is the most important feature. So I'm just gonna add between the description and the function, I'm gonna put a second argument here. So the function is gonna be the third argument. And this second argument is gonna be an object, which will have the property tags. And I'm gonna say @smoke, as we would do with Cucumber, where you put a tag with and the name of your tag. It's not mandatory to use but it's recommended since it's kind of a convention, right? So now I have this task that has this tag. And I have created before this script here that runs all the tests in headless mode. So let's just run them first before we run based on the tags. So before we were running the tests in interactive mode, where we can see the browser opening and all that. Now we are running the tests in headless mode, which is the mode that we use for running the tests in our CI server, right? Let's see if it's gonna work. If not, I have recorded the execution anyway. It seems to be slow. I think it's gonna fail. So while it's running, I'm gonna come here to package.json, and I'm gonna create another script. Let me see where it is. Yeah, one task has failed for some reason. It seems that it timed out. So let me just find it out. Just a moment. So I'm going to create here another script called smoke column tests, which is going to run Cypress run, but it's going to pass the --env grep tags equal to @smoke. And this means that when I run this specific script, so yeah, one task has failed we could take a look into the video here that was recorded, or the screenshot actually, to see that, yeah, it didn't, for instance, like the request took longer than it expected, and then it wasn't able to move on. So it can happen when you are testing like third-party APIs. So I have no control over it. What I could do would be mocking the responses, for instance, but I'm not going to do that for now. So now I'm going to run this new script here that runs only the smoke test. So as you can see, it's running Cypress run -- and grep tags equal to smoke. And then because I put in the plugins file that thing, that code, it tells me here, Cypress grep filtering using tag smoke. And then as you can see here, it skipped all tests that have no tag, and it executed only the test that we wanted, which means that we had much faster feedback than if we would run all the tests at once. So the idea is that you can run the most important tests first, and only if they pass, you run the rest, right? So I think now we are done with all the code, and I hope we still have time. So the key takeaways of this talk is that without Cucumber, the testing code gets simpler, and we can still have descriptive test cases using the keywords given, when then we can talk the same language as the developers, which in this case would be JavaScript. And by knowing how to use JavaScript, we can use the functionalities that JavaScript gives us, like the for each, to iterate over a list to save us some lines of code, so that we don't need to run the same test again and again. We can just iterate over a list. And by using Cypress grep plugin, we can run tests by their tags. So I hope we have some time for questions, and I hope you enjoyed the session. So that is what I had. If you want to stay in touch, here's my website, where you find my Twitter profile, my LinkedIn profile, my profile on Udemy, my profile on Dev Community, where I write in English, and on Medium as well. I stopped writing on Medium, and I'm now writing more on Dev Community, but you'll find some content on Medium as well. And yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you so much, Walmyr, for the wonderful session. And guys, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A tab. And also, like as Walmyr mentioned, like you can contact him on the LinkedIn and Twitter, get your doubts clarified. And it was an amazing practical session. And thank you so much for your time, Walmyr. And I believe we are almost done for the event, and it's time up. And guys, like if you have any questions, like it's a final call, like you can use the Q&A tab, and Walmyr is ready to answer all your queries. Okay.
Yeah, and if you are ashamed, you can contact me directly via LinkedIn or Twitter as well.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Thank you so much, Walmyr, for the great session. And thank you so much for your time. And thank you, everyone, for attending this wonderful session. And please watch our social channels. And also, you will get an email. And we are publishing the upside down QA stories every day from the QA leaders across the globe. And please check our social channel for the inspiring stories. Yeah.
I see that there is one question here from Pradeep.
Right. Yeah.
Is it good strategy use multiple before each in one describe block? So in one describe block, I wouldn't say it's a good practice to use multiple before each, but when you have inside of your describe, you have another context, then you can have a before each specifically created for that context, as I did in this session here, where I divided so the idea of before each is that there are steps that you want to execute that you would want to you want to execute them for more than one test, and you don't want to repeat the same code again and again, and then you create a before each block. So you might have a bigger before each for the whole describe block, which is like visiting the web page you want to start on or logging into the application. But then you can have contexts that will be sub suites of your bigger suite, And for those, you might have more than one test, as I showed you in one of the examples where we were checking that the quick search button was shown, but also that the 20 results were there. And for that, I had two tests, and I had the same step for both of them. So I could have a before each inside of that context specifically created, and then it would execute before all the tests inside of that context, that before each. So yeah, I hope that answered your question, Pradeep.
Great. So thank you so much, Walmyr, and thank you so much, everyone. And if you have any further questions, then please do contact Walmyr on his social channel, and you can reach him out and on his website as well. Yeah. Thank you. Signing off, and see you all in another amazing session. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.